He who lives only for pleasure and whose soul is not in harmony, who considers not the food he eats is idle, and has not the power of virtue. Such a man is moved by selfish temptation, even as a weak tree is shaken by the wind. Hi everybody, my name is Matthew, and I'm going to be talking to you about Buddhism and food. When doing research on Buddhist cuisine, I was expecting to find a list of rules for what was allowed and what was not. Unfortunately, that is not the case. The only list I came across the whole time I was doing my research was top 10 meats Buddhist monks are not allowed to eat. These include hyenas, boars, tigers, lions, snakes, dogs, horses, elephants, and humans. So I guess that's a good thing for us. There's a great deal of diversity in the Buddhist eating practices. Many depend on the area you are from, or the specific school of thought of Buddhism you subscribe to. I'm going to try to simplify some of the ideology of Buddhism cuisines and kind of go from their similarities and differences. The first precept of Buddhism is often interpreted as refrain from doing harm. This is the precept where Buddhists get the idea of not eating any meat or killing any animals. This ties to the belief of reincarnation and the belief that animals can be reincarnated as humans and vice versa. Some Buddhists go as far as to not eating any rooted vegetables such as carrots, onions, or potatoes because cultivating these vegetables actually kills the plant, so that's a bad thing. These Buddhists state that in times of Buddha, when monks were expected to eat everything that was put into their begging bowl, including any kind of meat or any rotten foods. In Buddhism, regarding one's diet, it is important to recognize that being alive by its very nature is the cause of direct or indirect suffering and death to other beings. One should avoid gluttony and greedy consumption while maintaining a healthy diet and lifestyle, which is conducive to attaining enlightenment. There are many different schools of thought about food in Buddhism. These include the Theravada, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, and the Engaged Buddhism. And these mostly have to do with eating meat or not eating meat. I'm going to go over briefly the dietary practices and some of the differences. The Theravada subscribe to the belief that meat eating is karma neutral and refuse to institute vegetarianism. They believe that any act of consumption would cause a degree of proxy killing, and so just avoid any gluttony or any other act of craving which leads to overconsumption. The Mahayana believe that the Buddha vigorously denounces the eating of meat, and on the grounds that such an act spreads fear among the sentient beings, who can smell death on the meat eaters, and who will consequently fear for their own lives. And since all creatures share the same spiritual essence, that killing and eating other sentient beings is a form of self-killing and cannibalism. And in their teaching, Buddha stated that on the eve of his death, that eating of meat extinguishes the very seed of great kindness. They also add that eating any kind of meat or fish is totally prohibited. The Vajrayana or Tibetan Buddhist position is that it is not necessary to be a vegetarian. The Dalai Lama invites the Vajrayana Buddhists to adopt vegetarianism, but states that vegetarianism is not the key to enlightenment. When asked in recent years what he thought about vegetarianism, the Dalai Lama said, "It is wonderful and we must absolutely promote vegetarianism." Engaged Buddhism states that Buddhists are to do as little harm to other creatures as possible. If someone is a monk, a nun, or a beggar, then eat whatever you can non-violently acquire to sustain one's life and practice. But for those of us who purchase our own food, it is unacceptable to buy meat or any other product which promote animal exploitation, especially when other options are available. In their view, all consumers should totally just practice veganism. In today's society, many Buddhists' attitude towards vegetarianism vary by location. In countries of Southeast Asia, monks are allowed to eat almost anything, including meat or whatever else they want, especially if it's given to them in their little beggar bowl. While in China, Korea, or Vietnam, monks are expected to eat no meat at all. In Taiwan, Buddhists are expected to eat no meat, no animal products, or any of the 5 pungent spices, which include garlic and onion, saying that those spices promote sexual desires and sometimes anger. In Japan, clergy practice vegetarianism while at the monastery, but when they're not in the monastery, they eat whatever they want. In Tibet, because they're way up in the mountains, vegetables are kind of scarce, and vegetarianism is very, very rare. They do stay away from birds and fish, saying that red meat is a better choice because one big animal can be killed to feed a lot of people. In the West, a wide variety of practices are followed, depending on what school and teaching you are aligned with. Okay, now for feasting and fasting. Some of the feasts that are practiced in Buddhism are the birth, the enlightenment, and the death of Buddha. In the Mahayana school teaching, those are 3 different days, and they celebrate all 3 of them. While in the Theravada Buddhism, all 3 days are unified into one single holiday called the Vesak. Buddhist monks are expected to fast completely on the days of a new moon and a full moon. They are also to avoid eating any solid foods after noon. They say this is done as a means of purification. Buddhists are also encouraged to fast as a means of freeing their mind. All that being said, one Buddhist philosophy states that in times of emergency or inconvenience, obstinately observing vegetarianism or Buddhist rule in times when you cannot is considered to be stubborn, which will become an obstacle to nirvana or enlightenment. However, even then, if one undertakes a vow to be a Buddhist vegetarian, one is expected to follow this vow until it is humanly impossible to continue one's vegetarian diet. So basically, if you're in a hospital and you're taking care of some Buddhists, just ask them what they want to eat. Alright, today we also have some choices for you. Whether you're a vegetarian or not, we have some steak and we have some vegetables. Enjoy!